Today we're talking about stuttering. Stuttering is an unusual disorder of speech motor production that normally begins during the first years of life. The first signs of this disorder appear when...
Hey, Prof, that's easy for you to say. How about we listen to some people tell their stories who stutter on a day-to-day basis?
Well, if you really must.
I think we should.
I think your name is part of your identity, and if you label yourself as a stutterer, then my name, like Michael, is a stutterer. So that name becomes very hard. And I've known people who stutter who change their names, or they use a nickname. And that's okay for a while, but then once that nickname becomes a part of their identity, they start to stutter on that name as well.
Saying my name,
so
Bruce, can be, especially if people are waiting, like in a introduction situation, and there's other people there that also want to say their names, and you can't get it out. Well, you get comments sometimes like, what, have you forgotten your name? Or had to think about that, didn't you? But anyway, that happens occasionally. But I suppose you just have to live with it, don't you?
Because I have trouble saying my name. I think the thing about saying your name, well, there's two things. People expect you to know your name. They don't expect you to hesitate when you go to say it. So if you do, they don't know what's going on. That's a bit awkward. And of course, if you start to stutter on it, then you anticipate, next time I'm going to have trouble saying my name. And because that just makes it worse in time. You've got to really try and nip that in the bud.
I can remember one real experience, and it really haunts me, to be quite honest. I was arrested and held on suspicion of armed robbery, and this was before I had any speech training whatsoever. And after we had been in a lineup, which we were the only ones in the lineup, I had to give the policeman my name, address and date of birth. Well, he had his notepad out and I was blocking, and he was tapping on his notepad. And it felt like about half an hour before I got out my name, address and date of birth.
I would say that 90% of the time I do have trouble saying both my first name and my second name. I remember this one time I was with my sister-in-law and we had to go around the group, and because I couldn't say my name, I said her name instead, and it seemed to come out, so I was able to say her name, and then she quickly picked up what was happening and she said my name. Yep.
I've had a lot of trouble over the years saying my name. I don't know why stutterers have problems saying their name, but they do. I guess one could change their name if they wanted to, but I don't think it's really going to solve the problem.
I haven't ever had any trouble saying my name, but my name begins with an H, and I've never ever stuttered on an H in my entire life, so that's the reason. So in that regard, I'm just plain lucky.
It's a real pain trying to say your name. I used to try and say, my name is Peter, and put a filler in at the start. If I could do that, I could often get it out, but often on the phone they just ask for your surname, and trying to get it out, and I always say my Christian name first, and it's I just want your surname, I don't want your first name. That's what I say. Tough.
Yes, I did very early on when I was younger, but over the years I guess I got more confident with it, and I really don't have much trouble at all now. It's fine.
I've always had a problem. I can often say the Howard because it's a H, but at high school my mate sat beside me, had a very deep voice, and when And when we joined a new class, there was 40 odd in our class, it would get done and he'd say my name. And then the deep voice, everyone would look at him. That's not how I'd done.
Saying my name has always been a massive problem for me. The number of times I need to spell it as well too, because it's a fairly long surname, so... But I think that most stutterers do have problems with their name. I'm sure that just about every stutterer has given serious consideration to changing their name, which would work very, very well, I'm sure, for about a month or two. But then it would all come back.
I don't have trouble to say my name because I named myself John on purpose because I got no problem of speaking John. But if I have to name like Alex, yeah, I might have trouble on saying that word.
Some people think I just don't know how to say my name, but actually I was just struggling to get the words out.
But in this day and age of Facebook, I just can't understand people who get onto Facebook and say, yes, I stutter, but I'm proud to be a stutterer. I believe it has empowered me. It's made me a stronger person. I wouldn't change anything in my life. I'm proud to be a stutterer. To them I say, rubbish. You're kidding yourself, but you're not kidding me. There's not a stutterer that's ever been born that doesn't wish he wasn't born a stutterer. Believe me.
Stuttering is very frustrating. You know what you want to say and you know how to say it, but when you want to say it, you can't. You're almost jealous of people who can just say whatever they want to say when they want to.
It is a pain in the butt for the person trying to speak, and it is probably a pain in the butt also for the person trying to understand what you're saying. So maybe that's about it.
Why do I stutter? Why me? Why isn't the other bloke? I'm as good as them. Why have I been inflicted with it? It's such a pain.
I would say what really annoys me is my inability to, I suppose, properly communicate like others can communicate, and it makes me feel slightly inadequate at times. But I think at the end of the day, it's important to realise that while stuttering is a barrier to communication, it isn't too big of a barrier, and that I can communicate well, even with a stutter.
I think blocking is the worst when you go up to someone and you try and either get your name out or say something and you're blocking all the time. It's embarrassing at the time. Someone said just get over it and move on, but it's not trying to speak, not being able to speak fluently all the time. That really cheeses me off.
That other people don't have to think about. Other people just say what they want to say. That'd be nice.
I always wanted to tell good jokes, and unfortunately, when I get to the punchline, I usually go to pieces and stutter. So, yes.
And then the other frustrating thing is if you are having a not so good day and you just run out of breath. It's a physical thing. It's quite tiring. There, I should have taken a breath in, you know. I missed the cue. So, breathing's always been my problem.
Whenever possible, I ask my dad to use the phone for me because using the phone really, really scares me. But recently I've been trying to answer calls myself, and I have been becoming braver, which is really good.
In my earlier working days, I would prefer to walk up 3 flights of stairs rather than to make a phone call.
When I was young, I had a lot of problems using the phone. I had a bad block. When someone would phone, I would pick it up, and 40 seconds later I could make no noise. The people would assume that there was a problem with the phone, and they would hang up. Very frustrating and demoralising.
Since I've had speech therapy and I've learnt smooth speech, it isn't, or I don't fear it anywhere as near as when I was much younger.
I always find it's an effort. I've got to push myself to the phone. But the funny thing, I never have trouble talking to Telstra because they're so impossible. And when I project my voice and raise my voice, I'm right. But it's hard work, and because it's so hard, when I was in industrial sales, it cost me a lot of money. I knew I should make calls.
The phone is quite hard. I notice when I start using the phone, my stuttering increases. If I know the person on the other end, I can eliminate it. But 9 times out of 10, because they can't see me, people don't know if I'm still there.
The phone is definitely harder for someone like myself. When I'm having a bad day and I block or I stutter, the person on the other end of the line doesn't know that I'm stuttering or I'm having a block. So to them, it may come across as I'm not paying attention to them or I'm not answering their question.
Oh, over the years I've seen various responses to my stuttering where people would laugh, people would avoid eye contact, things like that, or they would smile. But everyone reacts to it in a slightly different way. It is something I've just got used to over the years.
I guess the thing that happens most now is that if I stutter, people assume I'm anxious, shy, and may start to talk to me as if I'm a very small child. And that's not appropriate. I can understand why they do it. They're trying to be helpful. They're trying to put you at ease, I suppose. But it's a bit condescending. So, yeah, I don't like it.
I think when I'm actually stuttering, I feel as if people are responding inappropriately sometimes. But when I stand back and objectively assess the situation, most people don't really care that much. So I think it's important not to take things too personally.
Yeah, I don't think people do it intentionally. I suspect that they get very embarrassed at times when you block and they look at their feet and all this sort of thing. But no, I think it's more a case of embarrassment rather than something to upset you, perhaps. Or
occasionally, particularly if you get a block and perhaps you have a facial, like spasm, where they think, "Oh God, this guy's having a fit," and they say, "What's wrong with this guy?" They you can tell by perhaps the look of puzzlement in their eyes or a comment. So that can happen on the odd occasion.
Yes, society still doesn't understand stuttering as much. So, for example, when I was trying to introduce myself, I couldn't say my name, and the person on the receiving end, instead of waiting, turned around and said, have you forgotten your name? Now, in their eyes, they must have just been joking around, but for a stutterer to hear that all the time, it's not a good feeling.
Often you see people in the background, if if you block, they all look at you. But probably the person I'm talking to, they might look down and look away, and while you're having your episode of trying to get whatever you're trying to get out, and it's a...
At school, I had a few boys used to mimic me. I could have killed them, but most people are embarrassed, and I find they look away. They generally look on the ground or at my shoes or somewhere down there. But it is very unnerving and frustrating.
I was in a shop a couple of years ago, and the sales rep asked me for my name. I tried to get it out, but I was having problems. He asked me on the spur of the moment, which I think is even a bit more difficult sometimes. I couldn't say my name. He said to me, "Don't you know your own name?" And I was really affected by that.
There was a time when I tried to talk to a friend, and actually that's one of my new friends, so I stuttered, and she laughed, and I don't know what to say and how to continue my speaking, and I want to get back on right track and not stuttering, but I just couldn't control myself, and I stuttered again, and she just laughed, but I don't know what to say to her, so I just find an excuse and leave.
My experience is I've had people not want to talk about it. It becomes the elephant in the room. Or they try to do things to make it as easy for you, so answering your questions or finishing your sentences, and that becomes a bit offensive in itself. Mocking laughter, I had that when I was a kid, but not so much in my adulthood. I get angry when I just can't get the words out, and I try my technique, I try smooth speech, I try lowering my speed, my rate of speech. I try to link my words, but sometimes it just does not work, and then sometimes I actually give up. I just say, okay, I'm just not going to talk today, or I'm just going to be antisocial today because it's just not worth it.
It's very easy to write, it's very easy to listen, but it's really hard to say stuff when you want to say it, and it gets even harder when sort of people just don't actually wait for you, and I think that's really hard. Yeah.
At work, it can be very difficult, and I think, in my experience, that's about time pressure. You feel the people I was talking to at work only had a few minutes to listen and didn't have time for me to stutter and to take the time that I needed to be as fluent as I could be. I think it's about the time pressure, and the other situation is an open plan sort of office when you're on your phone trying to have a conversation and other people can hear what you're saying. That's just so much pressure.
No, I had a very good boss, fortunately. I was very lucky there, and the initial job I had when I first left school didn't involve much communication with people. I was in a laboratory analysing steel, and there was a little scope there for interaction with bits of steel. So
the work situation for me was always very bad. I'm quite sure that I missed out on many promotions over my life, and in fact I was told so.
And I have lots of experience on failed interviews. And one time I have a phone interview, and they scheduled a time for me to ring me up, and I know what day and what time they will ring me. So before that day, I brought a bottle of wine, and I drink it, maybe half of the bottle of wine, because I want to calm myself down. So I got myself well prepared, at least I thought. And then I wait to them to call me, and they call me on time, and I stuttered like a hell, and I just could not speak a single sentence. So so they stopped the interview in the middle of our conversation, and I asked them, "Can we do it again?" And they said, "Do you really want to do it?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Okay." But then they hung up and they never called me back.
Having a boss that understands that you stutter but is still very dominant, and in the workforce everything's fast, paced, that they don't sort of give you time to talk.
Well, I'm a speech pathologist who stutters, so I actually treat children and adults that have communication, like disorders. So for me, I've always seen it as I actually don't know where I stand with my stutter as a speech pathologist. I've always been in two fields of it. I can see that it's helped me in some regards, gain empathy for my clients, and on the other hand, sometimes particularly if I'm not having a good fluency day, it actually makes sometimes I question my ability to do my job. My workplace is very understanding. I've never had issues, around that. Sometimes some of the parents that I work with, it can sometimes be an issue. But once I explain, and that's all I have to do. I have to explain that I sometimes stutter. It never becomes like an issue. But I guess it's that. I guess I hate saying it, that I am an adult who stutters, and I don't say it to all my clients, but when I do, it feels good after I say it. But once again, it feels like it's something I have to add in, and I feel like that then becomes who I am. I am the speech pathologist who stutters. And
when I was out on the road as a sales rep, I would call in at a sandwich shop some days. I used to love egg and lettuce sandwich. Unfortunately, egg was hard to say back then before I had treatment, or if my speech wasn't particularly good on that day. So chicken, lettuce and mayonnaise soon became my favourite sandwich.
I try to avoid ordering if there is if there is someone else with me.
Although I find it difficult to say the word concession, I have never avoided saying the word because I know that I'm entitled to a cheaper ticket. So why do I not say it?
Even ordering food over the phone, that seems to be all right. But when I order delivery and I have to give my address, I don't know why that's the issue. When I have to give my address, because you can't say your address. I can't substitute a 2 for a 5, or a 4 for a 7. So when it comes to that, when it comes to something that you have to say in a very particular way, that's what I find hard. So I don't do delivery.
I remember one teacher in Year 10 turned around to my mum and said it would be easier if she left because A, she stutters, and B, no employer would actually hire her on her stutter. So I actually went from one extreme to another extreme. So a lot of my teachers couldn't understand it, and so that's why school was hard.
I would say the only trouble I had at school was during was asking questions in class and reading out in front of the class, and occasionally speeches. But I do remember one of the last speeches I did in school was actually one of my best speeches ever, and it was actually after my smooth speech intensive course. And I think for the first time in years, people actually complimented me on my speech and the rate of speed I was at, and said it was perfect.
I went to two different schools. One school, I had a very enlightened teacher who, in fact, got me up in front of the class and even put me into a play, which was about a stuttering beggar. So I was obviously the star part for that one. But otherwise, no, I did have trouble being bullied and people mimicking me. And
school was that place of torture, anxiety, and definitely somewhere to get away from. It's a place where they tried to make you read out aloud. Now, they tried to make me read out aloud for probably 5 years. They never succeeded yet, but it didn't stop them from daily trying to get me to read out aloud. I had to get out of there at the earliest possible situation, and I did.
We were reading Shakespeare one day, I think A Midsummer Night's Dream, and she had this thing where she would start at one student, they would read out a few stanzas, then the next student would read out a few stanzas, and I could just tell immediately I was going to be number 22 there in the line. I couldn't think of anything else. And that moment of dread when it was my turn, and I hated that. I just hated that.
One time I was supposed to recite a poem, and I think that we all had to learn. I got up and I had a block, and he said, "Well, you haven't learned it. Come and see me at lunchtime." Well, go back at lunchtime and try again. I thought that was a bit unfair because I had learnt the poem.
A problem, I very rarely put my hand up to answer a question because I didn't want to make a fool of myself. But the teachers generally understood me, and I made good friends with a lot of my teachers.
Avoidance is definitely an art, but it's an art that stutterers have to learn. And of course, I've had well over 50 years of avoidance techniques. I know every avoidance technique there is to man. Yes, all the little ahs and ums, the filler sounds, the filler words, the little well, yes, all the little lead-ins just to get you going. That's really a part of the art of stuttering, yes.
Well, when you're younger, you practice a lot of word avoidance, a lot of people avoidance, situation avoidance.
No, I don't think I'd avoid people. Some words where there's perhaps W, L, heart consonant sometimes. I try and perhaps think of alternatives to those at times. Yeah.
I don't avoid doing a particular activity just because I stutter. But there are times and circumstances where I try to substitute the words.
I definitely have learned an alternate vocabulary. I am a bit of a thesaurus. I know a synonym for every word that I can think of. So if I'm having difficulty saying it, I can immediately come up with another word that I can substitute in for it.
I get so frustrated and cranky because I feel that I'm not as good as the other people who don't have a speech impediment, and I think, why me? Why me? Why me?
I think anxiety makes my stuttering a lot worse, in that I over-focus on my anxiety, and that's all I can think about. and I really focus on trying not to stutter. And ironically, because of that intense focus, I actually stutter. But what makes it better is when I try not to focus so hard on my anxiety, and I just accept my anxiety, and I actually focus on using my smooth speech to speak more clearly and fluently, and that helps.
Mine, I think, is mainly a function of my mental attitude. If I'm feeling good about myself and confident, I'll be a lot more fluent than otherwise. The anxiety levels, I believe, have a lot to do with my stuttering, particularly breathing and that kind of thing.
I find really smooth speech is what makes my stuttering better. Also, I find if I breathe really slowly and try and speak more slowly, I become more fluent.
Well, the treatment system now for stuttering is certainly far, far better than it ever was, and that's really the only thing that does make it better. You really need to learn a speech technique. I've learnt smooth speech technique. I started with my first 3-week intensive course back in 1971, did another one in 1977, and then did another one in 1991. But you really have to practice hard. You have to really put in the effort.
Going along to Speakeasy, best thing that happened to me, I think, in a lot of ways. Meeting other people who stutter, being able to talk to them about everyday problems that arise, just knowing that there are a lot of intelligent, capable people out there who stutter. It doesn't mean I'm stupid and anxious, and that's really encouraging and reassuring. And having a place to practice technique, having always people available where you can get yourself back on track when you need to.
Going to Speakeasy, the maintenance days, and trying to speak slowly all the time, it helps my speech. I think if I slow down and breathe a bit more, I can put in a technique you can click in, and I can speak fairly well.
I can't pin it down to any particular cause which would make it better on some days and not on others. It's just you have some good days and some not so good days.
Smooth speech has been very helpful in helping me cope with the physical aspects of my stutter. And in terms of the mental aspects of my stutter, I actually completed an acceptance commitment therapy program with a psychologist a year ago. And acceptance commitment therapy is a subset of cognitive behavioral therapy. And the main philosophy in ACT is just accepting your feelings
Sydney,
as they
Australia,
are.
We are absolutely spoilt rotten, I believe, because we have an organisation, Speakeasy, which was set up in 1980, set up by and for treated stutterers as a support mechanism, a place for them to go, to meet, to socialise with their peers, to practice their technique. And without Speakeasy, I would not be in the situation I am in today. But on top of that, in Sydney, we set up in 1985 a Toastmasters Club, specifically set up for and by treated stutterers, where you go to get 3 things: confidence, confidence and confidence. Toastmasters gives you the confidence that Speakeasy never gave me. And that, along with about 30 or 35 years of practice, really is the thing that gets me through my stuttering life.
That's all, folks.
Go home, folks.